So this is part 3 of mapping Osiris. In case you guys have not watched the first two, make sure you do that before you continue, because otherwise you might get lost on what I'm doing. So what we have looked at is we have looked at this map that the ancient Egyptians left us. And we know that the Nile is basically the spinal cord. And what it does is right here at the base of the skull, which is what you see right here, where it opens up, that's where they place the pyramids. And this is also the place where the pyramids of the brain are located. So with that information, we were able to determine, as well as the mirror that we see in the Orion Nebula, where this whole area up here represents the trapezium. But in a smaller scale, it represents the brain. But the pineal gland in both locations, and whether it be the macro or the micro version, is still located in the same area. So that's really important. You're going to notice the way when it comes up into the Nile area, see how this optic tract comes out and opens up right here? So you see the same thing right here on this in the Nile. There's lots of indications that can tell us that we are right on the money. So right here you're seeing where the pyramids of the brain are located. They're located right where the spinal cord goes into the base of the skull. And here's where it is on a diagram of the brain stem. Now, the ancient Egyptians somehow knew about this microcosm to macrocosm. And that's the reason why in Pyramid Text 442 they said, "Lo, he has come as Orion. Lo, Osiris has come as Orion." And what we looked up is we looked up that Osiris hieroglyph is an eye and a throne. And that eye and a throne actually turned out through alchemy that we've seen so far to be basically the pineal gland. And we've gone through all the parts and everything. So review parts 1 and 2 if you need to see that. This area right in the very, very center of the Nile Delta is called Busiris. Busiris is the place where Osiris and Ra's souls embraced. This tells us the soul is seated in this area. It's seated in the area where the pineal gland is. This transition that you see from the Nile to the Orion Nebula is showing us that they knew in Pyramid Text 442 that there was a mirror going on here. This is just one picture showing the mirror, but we can see that the Nile Delta and the Orion Nebula trapezium, they match. What's really interesting about these fractals around the Nile Delta here is this is not as simple as the leaf matching a tree. What it's matching is man-made recent development. When I say recent development, I mean at least less than 1,400 years, which is the number of light years it takes for light to travel from the Orion Nebula to here. And that basically means that time is irrelevant in this situation. As you can see what's going on here. Reality, it's giving us a little indication that reality may not be what we think, but it's definitely communicating. And it's not a natural fractal. Therefore, since it is man-made, since these are man-made grids, and it's mirroring that, there's an act of consciousness going on. There's an act of universal communication going on. More than likely, it's probably the collective unconscious, which means that it's all of us participating in this unknowingly. But it could definitely be something different. Now, what we've determined so far, and what I believe is the case, is that when it says that the construction of the pyramid is Osiris, it's basically pointing to certain things inside the brain. And this area that you see up at the top that they call the King's Chamber, which really is just something that they named, this area is where the pineal gland is located. We know this because the red dot that you see right there, that red dot is where Busiris is, and Busiris is the house of Osiris, and this is also where the pineal gland is located, because Osiris is an eye and a throne. So this is the house of Osiris. As you notice, I'm just a little bit off, because really the red dot probably could be right there, right inside that black triangle. But you can see that it's very marginal. And the area that you see that's the lower chamber fits right into the area where the spinal cord goes. And if you notice, when it comes up, when it gets to this so-called Queen's chamber, then it veers to the right. So that's why you see it coming up straight and then veering to the right, and you can see it's following the path of the Queen and King's chamber. This right here, we determined that it looks a lot like a Jed pillar, and I believe that's exactly what it is. Where the top of this, the triangle, which is actually what we see right here when we take a look in between the two thalamus, we see that eye in a tent. This is kind of a tent right here, which is where the pineal gland would be. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, which is the standard number of bars for a Jed pillar, and I believe the last one here is the pineal gland. Now let's get into the latest thing that I've been working on here. So notice the way the brain is placed inside the Nile and the Nile Delta area. It's not by mistake. It's done by because of the information that we have from the Orion Nebula. It's done from the information that we have from Michelangelo. It's done from the information that we have in geography, what the ancient Egyptians left us as far as the pyramids go. Everything. We have all these different confirming factors, which gives us a reason to place the brain here just like this, as well as what we see happening with this pyramid and the way that it follows the brain stem and the pons the way that it does, where this area right here, the open area, is the fourth ventricle, I believe. So the next thing that I wanted to take a look at is I wanted to take a look at the water. Because when we take a look at the water, when it goes out here, you would think that it probably looks a lot like the arteries and the circulation that you would see in a brain. And in fact, it actually looks very close. So as a rough draft, what I decided to do was to just go ahead and highlight all the water areas in the Nile Delta area. You can see how this forms kind of it actually has a head shape here, the way that it does this. You can actually see where the head is. And you can see how it forms, where the brain is located and everything. So this was kind of a rough draft. But the next thing I needed to be able to do was I needed to be able to locate some common arteries, some common circulation areas. And so I was able to do that. I was able to pull together 4 different patients and diagrams, put them all together, take a look at the commonalities, and I found that there are 2 major areas that are common, or they're pretty much common in all pictures, and they turn out to be the 2 major areas that we see in the Nile Delta. So this is a picture that you see over here on the left of the 2 main waterways that you see inside the Nile Delta that kind of split right there. They split basically right where the Great Pyramids are located. Great Pyramids are located right here. You see this decussation going back and forth, where they're kind of crossing back and forth, and then right here they split. And this is basically where right after it goes into the base of the skull, you see it split. So the thing is that we need to take a look at the arteries on some human diagrams, some MRIs, and see if we see something similar. Okay, what you're looking at right here is basically size for size, the skull as you would see it. You can see kind of the outline of the skull right here. But we can't see the pathways that we need to see. Here's our common channels. If you notice, these come up, the decussation that was happening that we saw earlier, right here, this kind of thing right here, where it goes back and forth. That's kind of doing the same thing right here. And then what happens that's common in all of them is it splits right here, which is what you're seeing right here. And this area goes way to the back of the skull, which is what you're happening right here. It's going to the back of the skull. And this other area zigzags and comes up just like this one does right here. And then it arcs and continues to follow to the right. Let's take a look at the second one here. See, the second one does the same thing. Comes up, this one goes off to the left, this other one comes straight up like this, which is what you're seeing right here, straight up, and then arcs to the right, just like that. So this area right here in the center of the brain, where Osiris is located, this area right here would be the same as basically the center of the head that you see right here. Here's another version. Here's the first artery that goes to the left, and then you have the one that zigzags and comes up right here. That's the same as you see right here. And even some of the imitations of the way that these arteries are reacting, the way that they look, are the similar every time. Here's another one. You can see that this artery travels to the left, and then you have this one here coming up and then arcing over to the right. Same thing right here. Splits. This one goes left, this one comes up, and then arcs over to the right. So I did the best to show you a diagram. You can see the common thing that's happening here on A every time. You have this V split, and it travels to the left each time in A. And then B, you see the same thing. It arcs up to the right, arcs up to the right, arcs up to the right, and arcs up to the right. And all, I used 4 different variations. So we're going to have some slight differences, but for the main purpose, we're going to see the same things happening here. So here we go. Here's A, and here's a zoom of A. And you can see the waterways, how they split, just like we saw right here. And then here's B, which is right here. As it travels up, the main waterway we saw in our first picture, and it arcs to the right. So these 2 main arteries that you see right here in the brain, this one here and this one coming up here, this one here and this one coming up here, these are repeated, and they turn out to be the same 2 main waterways that we see in the Nile Delta, splitting in the same area and continuing to travel around. So now we need to find out a little bit more about this area. What I just wanted to do, though, is determine whether the arteries are pretty much the same or not. So I hope you guys found that interesting, and stay tuned for the next one.